So I'm going to talk to you about vocal health, and this is my big passion. Is looking after singers who have vocal problems, who have injuries, who have just come adrift. And every single singer will have some kind of vocal problem at some point in their life, whether they're a professional or an amateur, because we're all human and we're all fallible and we all get poorly and things happen. And so we need to understand that this is normal and there are all sorts of very helpful ways to get around these problems. So again, I've got some slides to share, and what I'm going to do is in the chat, if you open your chat box, I've put in there, was just downloading now, the link to a PDF of the slides for this afternoon. So you can just drag that PDF onto your desktop if you've got a desktop. And off you go. And I'm now going to share the slides with you. And there we go. So this is about vocal health, and these are the sort of common problems that people will report. So loss of stamina, your voice might be absolutely fine, but it just gets tired really quickly. Similar to that, increase in recovery time, it might take you longer to warm up. You might lose some bits of your range. It could be the upper range, it could be gaps in your range. You might find that either loud or soft singing gets more difficult. You might just find aching, sometimes a sense of a lump in the throat. Your voice might be groggy more so than usual in the mornings. So all of these issues may point to the fact that your voice, all is not well with your voice, and you may need to think about finding some help. So what causes injuries? There is never one single cause. It's always complex. The only time there might be a single cause is when we have direct trauma. And that, as I said, might be a tennis ball in the neck. It might be a hemorrhage from coughing fit. It could be a road traffic accident. But even though the cause was just a one-off event, what follows on is then a very complex combination of vocal dysfunction and anxiety. So it's not simple, it's not straightforward. And most problems have a slow build-up. And even singers with a perfect technique, and I've never met one of those, even singers with a perfect technique can just do too much for too long. So we start with looking at the biopsychosocial model. And it's a sort of newish idea, but it's been around forever. And the idea is that everything is related to everything else. So we have the biomedical, which is, whether you've got pathology, whether you've got, diabetes, whatever those, your biomedical could be, that you've got lower back pain, any of those things. Then there is the social element, which is how you interact with other people and how your environment affects these issues, and how, for example, how long your rehearsals are, or whether you've had enough to eat. Those are all the social influences on your health and your voice. And then the psycho, which is the influence of the brain and anxiety elements and all sorts of other neurological issues. And they are totally interdependent, all three. You can't separate them. So when somebody comes along and says, I've got a problem with my voice, and I've been to the doctor, they say it's all in the mind. And my answer to that is, well, show me something that isn't in the mind. Because the mind is there, the brain is involved everywhere. So with that in mind, these are common causes, okay? Number one is the result of anxiety levels. That is the most powerful influence on our vocal health. So when things, you think you're coping and you're doing all right, something comes along, somebody gets ill, some, traumatic event, and your voice will be the thing that suffers. Infections, of course, can affect our voice. You get laryngitis, you can get a cold, you can get COVID. They will all affect your voice. The way we use our voice, so that's whether we're singing too loudly or for too long, or whether we're singing with an imbalanced muscle function, which is very, very common. And lifestyle, so that's eating and drinking, sleeping. And then non-abuse related illnesses, so that will cover things like reflux, which may affect your voice. So some of those we can control, and some of them we can't. So just understanding about them is important. So let's start with infections. The common cold. Now people are always asking, what can I take? What can I do? I've got a cold coming on, I've got to sing tonight. What should I take? If there was a cure for the common cold, we would all know about it. Yeah, doctors will be prescribing it. There is no cure. You can alleviate the symptoms, but you can't actually cure a cold. So you've just got to be nice to yourself. And as I say, alleviate the symptoms. Love your mucus. Now, when we've got a cold and we're all bunged up, this is the problem. The enemy is all of that mucus. But actually, mucus is your friend. Without it, you would not have healthy lungs or a healthy nose. And without it, you would not be able to make a sound. Because your vocal folds in your larynx here need to be wet. They need to be moist in order to make a sound. And that moisture comes from the mucus above and below them. So we need it. We need that mucus, but we need it to be wet and moving. And it's a problem when it's thick and sticky. So keep it wet and keep it moving. So we can do that with steam inhalation. We can do that with making sure we're not in too dry an environment. We can do it by making sure that we are properly hydrated from the inside. All sorts of ways of keeping our mucus wet and moving. The way that we use our voice, very common cause of problems. We talk about vocal loading, which is the amount of stress and strain the vocal folds are under. And there are three things that will increase vocal loading. One is the amount of use, so that's the number of minutes or hours per day that your vocal folds are colliding. The other one is the level of use, because the louder you are, the more impact there is. So I mean, for example, when I'm giving talks, lectures, I know that I can talk for 5 hours a day and my voice is fine. If I'm happen to be in a room with background noise or a bad acoustic, then I can't talk for 5 hours a day without amplification. So it's just simple maths. And of course, anxiety. Now, why is it such a major factor in all of this? Because of holding patterns. When we're worried, we get into a state of arousal. We get into the sympathetic nervous system comes to the fore, and we're ready for fight or flight. Now, of course, in our evolution, we evolved to deal with actual dangers, so real predators, and so we needed that. We needed to be switched on or switched off from that. Now we are dealing with imaginary predators. We're dealing with other issues which are not so huge and immediate, but they're just underlying for a long period of time. So what happens is we get into that state of anxiety and it's chronic. and it's mild, but it's for a long time. And of course, when we're in that state, we're getting ready to fight or flight. So we're getting, everything is on edge. Our muscles are holding. And the muscles in the throat and around the larynx hold just a little bit, but it's enough to mean that you're not singing with that easy, loose, balanced function. So any emotional stress will compromise your ability to do anything, and you're more likely to have injury. So anything that you do a lot of, if you're a pianist, and you will get injuries in your wrist, the forearm, right? Because that's what you're doing a lot. So that will be the thing that shows up if you're slightly worried. If you're a singer, it'll be your voice that goes. If you're a runner, you'll get injuries in your knees or your ankles or your calves. It's always the thing that you love most that gets broken. So, vocal loading. If you rub your hands together, rub your hands together, they feel warm. If you clap your hands together and then stop, you feel a tingle. So that heat and that tingle shows you what goes on when you are colliding those tissues in the vocal folds. And look at the number of collisions that we have per day. It's crazy. The female average fundamental frequency, that's the number of collisions per second, right? So that's the average is 230. Because I'm a bit older, mine's a bit lower. My fundamental frequency is about 200. So as I'm talking to you now, my vocal folds are colliding 200 times a second. It's a lot. And of course, if I were singing an octave higher than that, they would be colliding twice as frequently. So this is why, one of the reasons why women have a higher incidence of voice disorders than men, simply because their vocal folds collide more times per day because they are at a higher pitch. There are other reasons as well, but that is one of the major ones. So that collision, what you felt in your hands, the heat and the tingle, right? You're feeling what happens when you cause slight local damage to the tissues. And it's completely normal. It's fine. We're equipped to deal with it. We're very good at healing. But the process of healing brings in a little bit of extra fluid. So if you cut yourself, if you cut your skin and look at the cut, on either side of the cut, the skin is slightly raised. If you bruise yourself, the skin is slightly raised. Wherever you have an injury, you have fluid coming in as part of the healing process. And of course, that fluid, as it comes in, we've got the irritation there, the slight edema. That means that the vocal folds are a little bit stiffer and a bit more puffy. And the edges of them don't vibrate as easily. And that means that we're slightly husky and we have to push a little bit harder. And what happens when we push a bit harder? We bash them together more. So you can see how we get into this cycle of irritation and inflammation. How do we get out of it? How do we get out of this cycle? We learn some useful tips for pacing the voice. We've got 3 clocks there. And if you look at them, they've all got 40 minutes of voice use and 20 minutes of silence. And if you think about the average rehearsal or even performance, they're not singing absolutely non-stop. There are times when other people are singing or when there's rest time. The key is to split those rest periods up into as many small units as you can. So you don't need more minutes of rest per hour, but you need more units of rest. So mini breaks throughout mean that the rate of inflammation goes down more quickly. So lots and lots of mini breaks. So you can pace that into rehearsal. You can pace it into your own practice. You can pace it into your voice use if you are using your speaking voice to talk to a group of people. You build in lots and lots of mini breaks for the voice. And if you do something demanding, like a big sing of something that is loud or high, you need to build in a couple of minutes immediately afterwards to let the voice recover. So that's one thing we can do. Little bit of research that I've described underneath that, which is that fit bodies heal quicker than unfit ones. So that's another reason why you need to get out and walk every day or do something active if you can, because the fitter you are, the quicker you will heal. And it's to do with the metabolic functioning of the CO2 and the O2 exchange in the cells. One more thing you can do is stretch and massage. How does that work in the voice? Because we know that when you have a soft tissue injury, whether it's a sprained ankle or whether it's a torn shoulder, whatever it is, you need to keep it moving. The advice used to be wrap it up and keep it still. Now it is keep it moving, because if you move that injured tissue, it heals better. It heals with less scarring and it heals more quickly, because the movement itself actually helps reduce the inflammation and it helps the healing process. So how can we stretch and massage the vocal folds? What we can do is slides through the range. Now, SOVT stands for semi-occluded vocal tract. And the semi-occluded vocal tract is what it says it is. This is the vocal tract. Semi-occluded, half closed. So that's any kind of v, z, zh, any of those sounds, drr, or rrr, any kind of buzz or trill, or even a hum is a kind of occlusion. So those, if we do slides through the range, and I've said they begin small and then gradually extend, and you just go up and down. And that really gentle through the range is the nearest you can get to stretch and massage your vocal folds. And the latest bit of research that came along after the original research was done by a colleague of mine, Kitty Verdolini, and one of her PhD students did some more additional research and found that when you combine those exercises with mindfulness exercises, the inflammation reduces even more quickly. Because mindfulness works on the neurological start of the inflammatory response. So the inflammatory response starts in the brain. If you can reduce that at a neurological level, you reduce the inflammation at a tissue level. So that is, I mean, that's magic, isn't it? Your thought processes can heal your body. So mindfulness added in. I think a good dose of calm thought is good for us all anyway. So that's ways that you can reduce the inflammation. So if your voice is feeling a bit tired, there's some instant fixes for you. That's good, isn't it? If your voice is a bit worse than that, what might be going on? Let's just look through a quick whiz through the different types of problems that happen. These are the sort of things we find in the voice clinic. But as you could see, even though there are 4 distinct categories there are links between all of them, because one will lead to another. So the neoplastic are the lumps and the bumps, and you've probably heard of vocal nodules and polyps and edema and cysts and things like that. They're not a complete disaster. If you get those problems on your voice, good speech therapy will often help them go away. Surgery to remove them is generally, I say straightforward, it's not straightforward at all. It's straightforward for people who are brilliant at doing it. So you need to go to the right surgeon. But it's certainly not the end of the road for your singing. Inflammatory problems, we can have infections, the URTI, upper respiratory tract infections, that stands for. We can also have inflammation caused by things like allergies and reflux. Same kind of inflammation, but a different cause, and can affect the voice in different ways. So let's have a quick look at reflux. So reflux occurs normally when you're asleep, because when you're asleep, you're lying horizontally, and whatever is in your stomach is able to trickle up the food tube and can sometimes sit around the back of the throat. So if this is because you're lying horizontally, it's because all the muscles are a little bit more relaxed. So the muscles the sphincter muscles that normally hold the food in there. Also the cough reflex in the throat is switched down a bit when we're asleep. So this is why this is more likely to happen when we're asleep. So the first thing you can do to mitigate any potential reflux that you might have is to eat your main meal earlier in the day. If you go to sleep with nothing in your stomach, you're much less likely to get reflux. So that's the simple start. And then knowing that there are all sorts of other things that you can do. You can look at your diet. And there are no hard and fast rules. Some people find they can't eat tomatoes. Some people find they can't drink alcohol. Some people find they can't drink coffee. Some people find that they can't eat pineapples. You know, it's different for everybody, what irritates them. So there aren't any hard and fast rules. And then all sorts of other things we know can influence reflux. You can elevate the head of the bed, so you're not sleeping completely horizontally. That's a simple one. And all of these have been known to reduce reflux. The one at the bottom is probably the most important, because if you get reflux, you nearly always get it worse when you're worried about things. Neuromuscular problems, this is when we have palsy, spasmodic dysphonia. That's when the larynx goes into spasm, and it's a little bit like a stutter, but it's the larynx stuttering rather than the articulatory mechanism. Any of those will affect the voice because the nerve supply to the voice has been affected. And then behavioural things, so not just the way that you're using your voice, but lifestyle, simple things like whether you're drinking enough fluid will affect your voice. So what do we do when the voice goes wrong? Well, we've got instant things that we can do. If your symptoms stay the same and don't change at all for 2 to 3 weeks, then you need to go and see a GP, really to rule out terrible things that might be going on there. So you will get seen quickly. You may probably be seen by a non-specialist voice clinic initially, depending on what's available. At the moment, there's virtually nothing available. But the non-specialist ENT will be able to rule out gross abnormalities like cancer. For other things, you'll need to go to a voice specialist ENT. And that's when he sticks a tube in you and has a look, and the tube either goes in your mouth or it goes up your nose, and you have a little look at the vocal folds and see what they're doing. And a really good voice clinic will have a multidisciplinary team in there. But again, not at the moment because nobody's allowed in the room. So whole body thinking, this is back to the biopsychosocial, all right? We need to think of the whole person. Singers need to be fit and strong. I mean, that's a relative requirement. If you're a professional singer and you're on stage every night, then it's an absolute necessity. But to be as fit as you can be is going to help your singing. Any exercise is good. Any exercise at all. The only ones to avoid are really heavy duty bodybuilding work on the neck. Yeah. You know those guys you see where their head kind of joins the shoulders because they've really built the traps? That's the thing you want to avoid as a singer. But probably you are avoiding that one. Well done. And the other thing to avoid is making a sound whilst straining. So if you are either exercising hard or moving heavy weights around. Yeah, yesterday I was carrying really heavy bags of compost from one end of the garden to the other. While you're actually doing the lifting, don't make a sound, because while you're lifting, you are squeezing your larynx in order to produce a valve to close off the windpipe. And if you push sound through that, you're going to hurt yourself. Whole body thinking, what else affects the voice? I can see some questions coming in, but we'll deal with them at the end, if that's all right. Hormones. Hormones will have a huge effect on your voice. So the menstrual cycle and the menopause, because our larynx responds very much to estrogen levels in the body. So when you are premenstrual, your estrogen drops down. And when you're menopausal, your estrogen drops down. And at those times, you will often find that you have pitch uncertainty, that everything feels just more cumbersome, less efficient, less easy to move around, a little bit unpredictable. This is what you look like cut in half. So we've got the tongue here, got the teeth, chin. There's your larynx. That's the epiglottis. Now the epiglottis closes over the top when we swallow. This is the roof of the mouth, the hard palate, and then the soft palate. And then this is the nose, the nasal cavity, and back into the throat. I'm just going to close my curtain a little bit more. I have the delightful problem of sun coming in the window. Let's look and see what happens when we swallow. So looking at the food or the drink in the mouth, moves around in the mouth, gets to a certain point, and it's automatic. And you can see the epiglottis closing over the top of the larynx, and the food or drink goes down the back. All right, that makes perfect sense. So if you are having, here I am sipping a cup of tea, when it gets to a certain point at the back of my throat, this automatic response kicks in and everything closes off. The larynx lifts, the epiglottis closes. And it's an amazing thing, swallowing, because it's incredibly complicated. The sequence has to be exactly right. And if it goes wrong, we choke. And so when people have had, for example, they've had a stroke and they might have lost some of their coordination for swallowing, it's one of the first things that's worked on so that they can then swallow safely. As infants, we learn it. We actually practice swallowing before we're born so that we are born able to swallow, which again is essential for our survival. So this is what happens. The larynx lifts and closes. The food passes behind the epiglottis into the esophagus. So the mucus around the larynx is redistributed. Now that's the clever bit. Remember I said you need to love your mucus? So the mucus above and below the vocal folds gets squished. When you swallow, everything gets squeezed and it gets spread about. So that is the way that you moisten your vocal folds, is by swallowing and spreading the mucus that's already in there. So that is your moisturizing that you're doing for your vocal folds. What you are actually swallowing, whether it's tea or water or some kind of honey and lemon concoction, doesn't go near the larynx. So, and if it did, you would cough a lot. So although your honey and lemon, or whatever it is that you're swallowing, or your lozenges, might feel nice, it's a placebo, which is a great thing. Placebos are wonderful, but it's not actually soothing your voice. So my advice is that have anything you like, if it makes you feel good, as long as it's not got alcohol in it. We'll come to that later. But don't have expensive ones, because if you're buying very expensive honey to make your honey and lemon, it's just very expensive sugar for your body. Basically, that's all it detects it as, is sugar. Gets digested in your stomach. So get the cheap stuff. So let's think about hydration, because we do need to keep swallowing. Why do we need to keep hydrated? To stay healthy. For normal metabolic function, we need to be properly hydrated. The vocal folds from both ways. If you are systemically dehydrated, as in you don't have enough fluid in your body, the mucus that you're producing will be thicker and more sticky. So that's problematic. If you are drinking water, you're hydrating systemically, but you're also hydrating topically because you are squeezing that mucus around. And this is where the problems occur. You can get systemic dehydration if you just don't drink enough, or if you sweat a lot. You get topical dehydration if you're in a very dry atmosphere. One day we might go in an aeroplane again. And when you do, remember to keep drinking and don't talk too much. I will deal with this first and then I'll come to the questions. It's so tempting to answer the questions, but I won't. Drinking and eating, while we're on the subject. Late night meals, no, because of reflux. Not everybody gets reflux, okay? There are some people who can go and eat a large curry and drink a bottle of red wine at 11 p.m. and they're fine, all right? And they're very lucky. They don't have problems. But most normal humans will have some kind of indigestion after doing that. Fizzy drinks, again, if you're bringing up gases, they may have, it's not just the acids from the stomach, it's the enzymes. Caffeine and dairy products. Put your hand up if you've been told to avoid caffeine and dairy products for singing. Yeah, it's about half. There's no evidence at all to suggest that they can cause any problems. There are people who have an intolerance, and if you have a lactose intolerance or a caffeine intolerance, then you'll know about it because you'll have horrible indigestion. And if you have an intolerance, then obviously steer clear. But otherwise, dairy products might make you feel a bit claggy for a short time because milk is an emulsion and it's got fats in it which are more likely to stick around in your mouth and throat. That's all it is. Swallow a bit and it's gone. All right, it doesn't stay around for long. And caffeine, again, if coffee is the only drink you drink all day long, then you're probably not going to be properly hydrated because it is a diuretic. But as long as you're drinking water as well, it's fine. It's not a problem. Alcohol, you shouldn't drink alcohol before you sing, purely because you don't do it as well. If you've had a drink, you think you're really good and you're in fact a little bit worse. So don't do it. Save the drink till afterwards. This, of course, is a complete no-no for everybody. Smoking obviously will kill you, but before it kills you, it'll mess about with your voice. So it's an absolute no for singers. Vaping is probably as bad, if not worse, for the larynx. So avoid it if you can. Now on to pastels. Now this is one of the questions I can see in the chat coming up. Throat pastels and lozenges. So anything with menthol in it, the reason the menthol has an effect is because it stimulates the cold receptors in the skin. You put menthol on your skin, you feel the cold. If you inhale menthol, what happens is the cold receptors are stimulated, so you imagine that you're taking in more air because you can feel the cold air going in. So it may give you the impression of opening up the tubes and helping things. What it's actually done is irritate the tubes. So a small amount of menthol is okay. You know, we all clean our teeth with mint toothpaste. Okay, that's not going to harm your voice. But if you are swallowing a lot of menthol, it's probably going to do you more harm than good. Anesthetic as well. If you've got lozenges with anesthetic in, like strepsils, we don't want to be anaesthetizing the vocal tract. Now, of course, if you're properly ill, if you're really poorly, you take as much as you can. You take anything that you need to relieve the symptoms, and you make yourself a honey and lemon and put a whopping great dose of whiskey in it, and you take yourself to bed. You don't try and sing. So don't take any of these things in order to get through a concert. Right? Take them in order to get through a night. Swallowing is a good thing. And a placebo is a good thing. Anything that makes us feel nice is a good thing. So a lozenge that is relatively harmless, gentle, a glycerin pastel, something, will encourage you to keep swallowing. And so that is good. Somebody's asked whether you should have one in your mouth while singing. There's a danger there of inhalation. And if you're going to inhale a lozenge, it's not going to do your voice much good. And you're going to look a bit of an idiot in the performance as well. So I would really avoid singing with anything in your mouth. Keep sipping water. There's a lot of mixed advice about how much water one should drink during the day, and the answer is it varies for each individual because it depends on your own metabolism, it depends on your body mass index, it depends on your levels of activity. So you can calculate how much water you need, but the easy way to work it out is to pee pale. And if you're not going to the loo often enough, you're not drinking enough. And if you're going to the loo all the time, you're drinking more than you need. That's an easy one to work out. If you take an inhaler, for singers, it's better if you use a spacer, because the particles that you're inhaling, some are big and some are small. What we want is the small ones to go directly into the lungs, and the big ones, we don't want them to go in because they may land in the mouth and in the throat, and we don't want them landing there. So a spacer will help the right bits get into your lungs directly. Gargle afterwards, because if you do get particles in the mouth and the throat, gargling will remove them. If you leave them there, there's a slight danger of getting thrush. If you take a decongestant, make sure that you don't take them for too long, because they can have a dehydrating effect. And if you take them for more than 3 or 4 days, what happens is that the membranes get used to it, basically, and then when you come off them, you're worse than you were before you went on. Use the cross-arm technique that way. If you're inhaling anything into your nose, go that way, not that way. Steam and a sinus rinse are good. So, quick note on steaming. Steaming is brilliant for singers. It's a really good thing to do, and I always suggest the simple one of just a bowl of boiling water and a towel. And with the advice, don't be an idiot. It's hot water. So don't tip it in your lap and don't dunk your nose in it. But other than that, it's pretty sound. And you stay there until the water's not hot anymore and you've had a good steaming. Don't put oil in it. Just the steam is what is good. And then we'll avoid those. We'll talk about those if they come up. These are your safe alternatives to medications. Steam, sleep. Can't go wrong with a good sleep. Rest. Go and get some exercise. Have a change of scene. Or a change of attitude. Bit of mindfulness. Just even if it means just going and standing on the doorstep and looking out of the front door at a slightly different view. It's going to help. There's my little graphic of advice. I'm going to come out of the slides now because I'm going to answer questions. And I will work probably from the bottom upwards. Vocal zone. Yeah, you see, it's just money. People making money. Don't go near them. They do you more harm than good. Decaf coffee. It's a personal choice. If you feel better drinking decaf, then that's what you have. But the only thing is there's no scientific evidence to say that the caffeine is harmful, unless you're having so much that it's dehydrating you. But the caffeine itself is not hurting your voice. That's answered that one. Certain drinks that are said to be bad for the voice aren't so. That's right. Everybody knows their own personal preference, but generally, if you're taking anything in moderation, it's fine. Walter has sleep apnea and uses a CPAP machine. Well, I would say that make sure that you're hydrated as soon as you wake up. So this is good advice for everybody. Have a glass of water by your bedside and just drink the water as soon as you wake to start that process of rehydrating your body. When at the first thing in the morning, you are going to be dehydrated and you're going to need to top your levels up. Tom says it's a bass singing tenor, mostly falsetto. Finds it a more relaxed mode than straining for baritone and you're more registered. It's because you're used to doing it. All right, you're used to doing it and you're doing it well. If you got used to singing in your baritone register more, then that would feel more comfortable too. If you learn a skill and learn how to do it efficiently, then it shouldn't be a problem. What new? Working in a stressful, demanding job for many years, could that cause loss of falsetto? Well, yes, because of the tension, the muscle holding, but also falsetto will probably become less easy as you get older. Of course, there are all sorts of issues to do with aging voice, all the changes that happen to the voice over time, and the extremes of range will become less comfortable because falsetto is using specific muscles in a very particular way, and that becomes less easy because muscles atrophy as we get older. Of course, the more you do it, the slower the rate of atrophy, but eventually it catches up with everybody. Benefits, drawbacks of apple cider vinegar. I don't know. I mean, I'm not in on the whole apple cider vinegar thing. I would use it for a salad dressing. Other than that, too much vinegar is probably not going to do your stomach acid balance much good. But if you like the taste, then whatever turns you on, you feel free. Any comments about posture? Yes. There's no such thing as perfect posture. It's not to do with what position you're in, it's to do with your use and your balance. So you can move. Yep, I can use my voice and I can move my head around while I use it, and it still works. It's amazing. But what I would try to avoid is getting fixed in any one position. So stillness is not not advisable. Movement is great. So if your alignment means that you are in a state of being slumped most of the time, then that's going to be a problem because you're not moving so much. So find a place where you can move easily and in a balanced way, and that's probably the right head and neck alignment. Moving further down the body, lower back, pelvis, knees, make sure that again you can keep it moving. So I always do with students a little bit of a hula hooping with the hips, just to make sure there's not too much holding there. And that means that your breathing patterns are going to be regulated better. If you're hula hooping your hips, then you're not holding too much and you wake up the bits that have gone to sleep. So movement is medicine. Have we got time for more questions? I tend to. I don't know whether you need to have a quick break before you go on to the next session, or whether I can carry on talking about this. As you probably tell, I could talk about it for several days.
Well, the next session starts at 3 o'clock. So if you're happy to keep going, Dr. Williams, and for people to sort of pop out as they need to, then up to you.
Yeah, I can do that. Has anybody got any more questions? I think I've gone through. Oh, Andy says it's been very useful. Thank you very much, Andy. Cheers. There is, I tell you actually, there's more information on my website about this. Lots of free things to download, films to watch on my YouTube channel. There's plenty more information about this. I've also recently launched the Vocal Health First Aid training, which is it's a short course, level 2, 9 hours of online content and a quiz at the end. And if you want to know more about your own vocal health and the vocal health of other people, it's a really, really good course to do. And that is, I will put this into everyone in the meeting, vocal health education. If you look them up, you'll find out about that. And that could be something that you could all club together and send your MD on that. It's very cheap. It's very cheap and very easy. And we've been running it for 6 months now, and we've got 600 people who've gone through. So it's quite popular. Any other? I'm getting lovely, happy people putting messages in. Has anybody got? Oh, a question on throat clearing and coughing. It's only a problem if you do too much of it for too long. A little throat clear is all right. It's when it becomes habitual, when you keep doing it when you don't need to, that it becomes potentially a bit damaging. And the same for coughing. Yeah, if you need to cough, then cough. But it's when it becomes a chronic cough, which is just oversensitization of the whole of the cough system, then that can be problematic for the voice. And that's when sucking a lozenge can really help, because it can help you reduce your coughing. And the more you reduce the coughing, the more you reduce that oversensitization. So you get into a good cycle. But chronic coughing can go on for a long, long time. Cough. And it's not pleasant. And of course, when you're coughing, you're bashing your vocal folds together. So they're more likely to get troubled and inflamed. Any alternative to coughing? Well, if you've got gunge in your lungs that needs to come up, then steaming will help, and making sure you're hydrated. But the alternatives, if you feel like you've got something in your throat, yeah, some gunk in your throat, you can do a little bit of very gentle sliding, because as you slide through your pitch range, you're vibrating your vocal folds, and that will often just wobble enough to shift whatever's sitting on there. You can do a little bit of self-massage. If you move your larynx from side to side with your fingers, which is perfectly safe to do, that can help just move things around a bit. And then swallow. So if you do a bit of a pitch glide, a bit of a self-massage and a swallow, that will nearly always shift whatever is sticking in your throat. And you do that, and you can do that without clearing your throat. Okay, I think, yes, in performance swallowing only, because it's noisy coughing. I think we probably time to wrap it up now and let you stand up, because if you've got another session in 5 minutes, you need to stand up and move around. You can't stay sitting for all this time. It's not good for you. So we'll wind up and say bye-bye, as long as you promise to stand up and move everything about. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams.
Thank you.